This week's episode was brought to you by Swan. Thank you, Swan. It's with the generous support of elegant creatures like you that support the whole rabbit and keep us pumping our supply of ultra-clarified blood plasma from that sleeping ghost in the 7th dimension, which we're processing into a new form of cooking oil that's squeezed effortlessly from a tube and causes severe hallucinations when ingested, which the Ministry of Health assures us is the most important part of a healthy breakfast. If you'd like to help us manufacture hallucinatory squeeze butter, or just hear the second half of this episode, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation to our illustrious society will cost you a mere $5 and earn you instantaneous access to our entire archive of extended episodes that stretches all the way back to the days before the toilet paper shortages. But that's not all. When you sign up now, I'll send you a 5x5 high quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art, which absorbs solar radiation that turns into thermal energy, which can be used to melt the butter we were talking about just a moment ago. But if that were not enough, we'll even let you into our members-only Discord server, which is replete with a fountain of ragu and a pasta companion petting zoo. It's very zesty. In this week's episode, we finally arrive at the dramatic climax of Edgar Cayce's life, where his lifelong dream of building a hospital is finally realized, along with its many successes, failures, and ultimate demise. Here, during the twilight of Edgar's life, many of his psychic readings begin to reveal details about the rise and fall of the Lost City of Atlantis. Shockingly, a number of his descriptions align well with esoteric tradition and some archaeological discoveries that Heka Astra has pointed out in previous episodes. Hugh Lynn compares Hopi legend to the information given by his father in trance, while we discover links to Kabbalistic mysticism. Before the end of the free show, we even get to explore a number of interesting health tips and tricks provided by the source over the years of Cayce's work. In the extended show, we continue our discussion about the bigger themes we've recently uncovered about the Age of Aquarius and explore how Edgar Cayce's prophecies of the future lined up with events that actually did happen and ones that still might, including a controversial one about Russia. In the end, we discuss Edgar Cayce's twilight years, the organization dedicated to his work, and the powerful moments he would manifest during his final months on Earth. We hope you have enjoyed this series on Edgar Cayce, and we'll come back next week when we plan to have Tim Hacker back to collaborate with us on yet another, but very different and terrifyingly well-documented case of the supernatural. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the New Age Catholic Church?
No.
They got an organic gluten-free communion wafer. It's called, I can't believe it's not Jesus. One Buddhist monk leaned over to the other and quietly asked, are you not thinking what I'm not thinking?
I like that. That's funny.
What do dyslexic, agnostic insomniacs do all night?
What?
Lie awake trying to work out whether or not there's a dog?
Oh my gosh.
A priest lay dying. He asked for his lawyer and banker to see him on his deathbed. As they came near, he grasped their hands and prepared to meet his maker. The men were curious and asked why he wanted them to be near him on his last breath. He told them, Jesus died between two thieves, and so shall I.
Ew.
Hello everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just give you the bullet points outlining the most controversial predictions made by the world's best documented psychic medium. Oh no, dear listeners. We dive so far down the new aeonic rabbit hole that we arrive at the depth where ancient civilizations, occult philosophy, New Age mumbo-jumbo, and the apocalyptic prophecies of the world intersect, because this week we're exploring the terrific finale in the final and 6th chapter in the life and times of Edgar Cayce. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, also known as the Hack Rabbit. Once again, I'm joined this week by the dapper doggy dudette, Marisama.
Charmed, I'm sure.
The plasmoid crystal matrix photon recalcinator, Malachor 5.
Greetings.
And the diamond in the crust, Heka Astra.
Hello.
Well, we finally made it. If you've come this far with us, you do deserve a gold star, or a pizza party, or a yo-yo, or something. Maybe a scratch and sniff sticker. It's been quite the journey. I think the fact this series has so many parts is probably evidence that I needed to learn more about Edgar Cayce when I first heard of him. I mean, really, I think this all started for me
me when Carl Jung's fabled Red Book came out to the public. For years, Carl Jung's family had hidden it from the world, and it contained like all his unfiltered thoughts, his paintings and sketches, and it was all from a time when he had a psychotic episode where he believed that he came into direct contact with his own soul, and it was a big deal for him. The revelations he went through during this time would inform the rest of his career, and he almost released a collection of all of these works to the world in something called the Red Book, but Sigmund Freud scared him away from releasing it. He said it would release a black flood of occultism, and well, that's where it all spiraled out for me, because it wasn't just him. As I mentioned before, it was Aleister Crowley and it was Edgar Cayce. The people that were sensitive seemed to really get walloped right around World War I, right before it, with a message that a new age was coming.
I don't know. I also think that, I mean, Sigmund Freud had enjoyed already by that time years of success with basically forming psychology as a science. And I think he was worried that, oh, that's all spiritual mumbo jumbo. That's religion. We're a science. Like, this is a measured and studied thing. Like, it's not visions and dream analysis. That's stuff that savages do. That's what spirituality is.
Exactly. Because we sort of just left that in the dirt. And that was delivered to us in the beginning of our supposed golden new age. We're supposed to find the answers at the depth of our own soul. And it doesn't matter if you're Christian or Thelemic or Carl Jung. There's a certain formula to the new world that we're meant to move into.
Well, what makes me mad though about that is that perhaps this actualization that he went through, like having the interface with the spiritual as well as being basically integrated with the science, like how Cayce, his readings were scientifically accurate, but it came from spirit. So I think that it sucks that the unification of both, material science and spirituality was stifled at that point, because that would have been a great point for them to come together. But, alas, he didn't release that book, and Edgar Cayce was called a freak and, treated all sorts of ways because people thought he was a scammer. But it's like, I think for the healing of people, like if you're going to heal a physical malady, you have to incorporate the spiritual side of things as well as use medicines. So I don't know.
Well, I guess that's my point. You had Aleister Crowley for the world of the occult. You had film unleashing itself into the world of art. You had Edgar Cayce here, spirituality for the masses. So let's get into it. The conclusion of the life and times of Edgar Cayce. When wealthy New York stock trader Morton Blumenthal and his brother Edwin discovered Edgar Cayce, both he and his family were dirt poor, living in squalor at Daytona Beach and with almost no prospects to speak of. Edgar had fallen down the rabbit hole of giving free life readings, which gave vivid descriptions of colorful past lives of anyone brave enough to ask. While this made the Cayce family a pariah amongst their de facto support group of fellow churchgoers, it tantalized the Blumenthal brothers, who were ready to financially back Edgar Cayce's family just to have such powerful insight at their regular disposal. Around the time Morton had the inspired idea to have Cayce do readings on the life and times of Jesus Christ, he was ready to financially back the construction of the hospital that Edgar had long dreamed of, a place where patients would be able to actually receive the various treatments suggested in Edgar Cayce's readings. By the fall of 1925, Morton had procured a house for the Cayce family in Virginia Beach, as the readings had long suggested, and by the spring of next year had begun to raise funds for building the actual hospital. In the meantime, Edgar did his best to raise funds searching for buried treasure on the island of Bimini with his old friend Frank Moore and his partner A.C. Preston. Well, no treasure was ever found. It was during a reading on March 2nd, 1927, at the Halcyon Motel in Miami, that Edgar, during trance, revealed that Bimini was near where a great temple used to stand on what was known as Poseidia, also sometimes known as Alta, or sometimes more commonly known as the Lost City of Atlantis. Prior to this reading, Poseidia had come up a few times during life readings, but nobody really thought it was, true in the historical sense. In fact, 2 years prior, the source had informed Cayce that little Edgar Jr. was such a mechanical whiz in this life because he was actually a reincarnated inhabitant of Atlantis, which, as it is so often described, was both spiritually and technologically advanced. By the time Plato had mentioned it in the Timaeus and the Critias, Atlantis, according to the source, had been reduced to an island, the great continent falling under the ocean as a succession of tidal waves inundated the land during a great cataclysm. Evidence of this great continent were present between the Gulf of Mexico and the Mediterranean, at least according to the source. Likewise, Atlantis was more than a continent, but a magical place where the first humans incarnated on the planet and walked the earth. The story the source told on the matter seems infused with elements native to biblical Genesis, Gnostic cosmology, and would eventually serve as the ground floor to an entire New Age mythology still popular today. If you've ever collected crystals, you've probably heard this story somewhere downstream.
It's even found in like Lord of the Rings with the Numenorians. They live out on this island, and ultimately their own descendants are like Aragorn and stuff like that. It's like the kings of Middle Earth. Very deeply ingrained stuff in Lord of the Rings lore. Atlantis and the Numenorians.
Back in the day, did you ever watch the Sackboy channel on YouTube? It was like a new age channel where they talk about crystals and vibrations and all this flower of life type stuff.
Sackboy.
Sackboy. No, none of you? There's got to be a few.
No, it's what is it? Spirit Science is like the new one.
That's it. That's the one I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. Spirit Science is cringe as
This is where it comes from originally.
Atlantis?
This version of events, although it is a bit more complicated than that. According to the source, God first created the soul entity Amelius, who was described as, quote, pure light. This is none too dissimilar to the Adam Kadmon described in Hebrew mysticism via the philosophy of Rabbi Isaac Luria, which describes God as concealing the infinite light of source, the Ein Sof, within the cosmic soul Adam Kadmon, which is best understood as a creation of God in the image of God from which humans would be generated from. To greatly oversimplify. In Trance, Edgar Cayce said almost the exact same thing. In both tellings, the first being is conceptualized as both light and the ideal image of the Logos. According to Cayce, when God said, "Let us make man in our image," he was speaking to Amelius, and this resulted in human souls being created and taking up residence in the material world to experience physicality, or, as the source put it, vibrations of taste, sound, and touch. In Hebrew mysticism, this process is referred to as the Shevrat HaKalim, or the shattering of the vessels, which is a very esoteric and fancy way of saying that the infinite light of the Adam Kadmon was made to undergo a series of phase changes which, along the way, contracted into the various divine aspects of the material or sensorial world that humans inhabit today. It is these shattered vessels which collected the light of the Sephiroth within them, the same ones we see in the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, and constitute a path of return back towards the undifferentiated light of God, the Ein Sof, or as Cayce described it, the Maker. In Cayce's edition of the story, various souls, thirsting for carnal experience, became trapped in the world of matter, which necessitated Amelius also descending into matter, where he would create Eve, procreate with her, so the spirits attempting to incarnate would have the opportunity to take up an incarnation with a human form, which is important because it allows the spiritual journey back to the Maker. Does that make sense?
I mean, makes sense to somebody very familiar with Kabbalistic concepts. And to add a little bit more to that, it sounds like a reverse form of the idea of Mesla, that thunderbolt that comes down. This is sort of like a process back up.
Yes, absolutely.
But then also back down, right?
So Amelius, he was part of the Mesla, and now he's also the path back. It's basically the Tree of Life, Can you see why I think it is that we're grown like corn? You know what? I actually took this story and I shared it with Alawite Anon, and besides a few minor details and especially name changes, he was like, yeah, this is also pretty much what my tradition says, just, a few differences. But, he told us on the show that's because his tradition blends a lot of ancient traditions, and, to be fair, Cayce was studying this kind of stuff, so I don't know. It's much more Jewish mysticism than we maybe give it credit for. That's my whole point. In Cayce's telling of events, when Amelius incarnated, he led the other sons of God to establish a temple dedicated to the Law of One, which allows the inhabitants of the continent to rapidly advance beyond all the other cultures and civilizations on the planet. According to Cayce, the Atlanteans flourished under the Law of One and learned to cultivate and replenish soil, construct canals, create irrigation and public water systems, and even forge various lightweight metals. Its capital city was known as Poseidia and was built on a hill overlooking the sea. This description, a hill overlooking the sea, also sounds, vaguely reminiscent of the Egyptian mythological motif of the Ben, the primordial mound of land that arises upon the primordial waters. Then the plot line goes nearly Zoroastrian, as the source explains that
divisions between those of the Law of One, the sons of God who had retained their purity, and the sons of Belial arose.
As the source explained, the law of one was communal and charitable, focused on the service of others.
The sons of Belial, on the other hand, valued the gratifying, the satisfying, the use of the material things for self, without thought or consideration as to the sources of such, nor the hardships in the experience of others. They were those without a standard of morality. The sons of Belial had no standard, save of self.
I think it's interesting the way that Casey describes it because, I mean, I know that the term Belial is used in the Bible quite a bit, especially in relation to like people who have lost their connection to God are
Yes.
described as being sons of Belial, and that the Hebrew word translates to something close to worthlessness, and that there's an interchangeability between using the term of Satan or the adversary and the term of Belial as like a descriptor. So like you can find it being used as a way of describing Satan on numerous occasions. I mean, of course, I see things through a Kemetic lens. So to me, Belial is like Isfet.
Yes.
And it's like you can use Isfet as a way of describing Apophis or Apep because the two are related intrinsically. And people who can act from a point of Isfet would be disharmonious or disconnected to their source, which in Egyptian terms would be like your connection to your heart or the truth or the Ba. Sons of Belial would be like people whose Ba's have flown or have become disconnected from their heart. Their
Or
heart
how
is
they
imbalanced
call
with the
people
truth.
soulless that are evil. Like
Yeah.
if you're that
Yeah.
much of a sociopath, your eyes are dead, you don't have a soul, kind of.
I just find it fascinating that Casey's description, it syncs up perfectly with that.
I was basically going to say what Heka was saying.
Okay.
The source continues. The first upheavals in Atlantis were brought about when the activities of the sons of Belial brought to the daughters of the children of the law of one the abilities for enjoying the pleasures of excesses of every nature in human relationship, as well as those related to same.
This theme was repeated in another reading.
They gradually began polluting themselves with those mixtures that brought contempt, hatred, bloodshed, and those that build desires of self without respect for others' wishes.
Well, it does differ in a few ways. Belial's inclusion in the story is not terribly dissimilar to the mythology in the apocryphal book of Enoch, which details the fallen angel Shemyaza, who leads the sons of God in a rebellion against God's laws in order to selfishly indulge in the carnality of sex with human women, which has the side effect of creating a race of giants known as the Nephilim, who, in turn, rampaged throughout the land, terrorizing and eating everything they could get their greedy hands on. Edgar's version plays a lot more like the plot of a Monster Hunter game, similar to how the Grigori, or Watchers, accidentally created the Nephilim giants. The Atlanteans, the same ones who were said to have created the animals in the first place, not sure how that works, lost control of their creations by, quote, influences of the power of suggestion, and they grew to be these giant, aggressive, ravenous monsters who rampaged through the countryside. Awesome.
Are you familiar with Big Chungus? Big Chungus.
So terrible was the reign of these gargantuan beasts that their rampaging had brought all but Egypt to its knees. There a council was held to determine what should be done. According to one reading, this had to be accomplished in an airplane of some sort.
In days when the peoples of nations gathered together to defend themselves against the fowls of air and the beasts of fields, came to meeting in lighter-than-air machine.
A decision thereby was made to hunt the beasts until their extinction, which put the great technology that was once used to give life now towards the destruction of life.
In Atlantean land, just preceding the first breaking up of the land, when there was the use of many of those influences that are again being discovered, that the sons of Belial turned into destructive forces, could be benefits to communications, transportations, etc.
So, electricity, all this stuff Nikola Tesla was working on.
Technology, alchemy, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you can use radio to heal or to hurt. You can make communications, or you can make a death beam, I just think it's great that Monster Hunter actually happened. I think there's flying machines in that game too. And then they land and they have to kill all the animals on this unconquered continent. So it's historically accurate. Let's never forget that, okay? So this breaking up period is mentioned. Now, the way the story went, Atlantis was said to have been brought to its knees by a catastrophic meltdown of what a century later sounds remarkably like a giant nuclear power plant, which Casey described as being fueled by something called a
Firestone, such as we may find in those that make for the active forces and that of uranium.
Fairly straightforward. This firestone had apparently been unintentionally turned too high and either exploded or initiated, as some readings suggest, a polar shift or a flip of the magnetic poles, and this in turn caused volcanic activity and subsequent tidal waves that subsumed the continent, leaving all but 3 of its islands, Poseidon, Arya, and Og. I'm gonna guess that's where the Aryans are from. Go figure.
Oh, probably, because it was a mountain peak, so it was definitely an island when the floods happened.
So as I mentioned, this is sometimes referred to in the readings as the breaking up period, and is thought to be the origin of the world's flood myths. Many of these various plot points were collected from various different readings, with many small portions containing a summary of the whole.
In Indian land, when Sed was ruler, among those who gathered to rid the earth of enormous animals which overran the earth, but ice, nature, God changed the poles, and the animals were destroyed, though man attempted it at the time. So I guess, like, the resulting action in, I guess, climate change or the response of the weather events actually culled the animals, even though the humankind was trying to kill the animals.
Yeah.
It's like the earth was just like, get out of the way, newbie, and
Yeah.
like did it for them because they had fucked up so hard.
Yeah, they threw off the whole balance, they messed up the planet, and then, yeah, God did the rest of the job for them. Which is...
Sounds really familiar, doesn't it, guys?
It does. I just like that the giants are monsters instead of big, muscle, oily men that eat bread.
But pretty much also, not only does every culture in the world generally have a flood myth, a lot of them also have origin stories that talk about giants
And dragons.
and dragons and like these crazy animals. Yeah.
So it really does kind of sound like Atlantis had some kind of an iron dome for dragons. Or maybe just giant demon pterodactyls. Then they turned it up too high and it fried the magnetosphere. All I know is that someday we'll find out this was all literally true, and then I can say, I told you so.
It all sounds like One Piece.
The kaiju were real the whole time.
Or the Lost World.
Edgar Evans would later write a book about his father's Atlantis readings that he pointed out lined up fairly well with Hopi legends, and even some stuff we've even talked about on the show recently. In summary, Edgar Evans explains.
The Hopi legends describe the destruction of this first world because people used the vibratory centers of their bodies solely for earthly purposes, forgetting their creator. The legend continues with a description of the separation of men and animals and the destruction of the first world by volcanic action and fire. Some people were saved by hiding in caves and eventually emerged to begin a second world. This second world of Hopi legends sounds like one of high civilization as villages were built and goods traded. However, the more people traded, the more they wanted, and they soon forgot to sing praises to their creator and began to sing praises for the goods they bartered and stored.
Wall-to-wall mini-tunes. You call them commercials.
Here's that classic you've all been waiting for. The #1 request of the day. Armor hot dogs.
Kids eat armor hot dogs.
Oh, wow. This is my fave.
The people quarreled and wars began. The destruction of the second world is interesting, for according to Hopi legend, the earth did not continue to rotate properly, but teetered off balance and spun crazily around and rolled over twice. Mountains plunged into the sea, and the sea sloshed over the land. The world spun through cold, lifeless space and froze into solid ice. This brings to mind Edgar Cayce's statements of a shift of polar axis. And of course, there is historical evidence of an ice age associated with the worldwide climatic changes. Damn, even Edgar Evans, ahead of his time.
According to Cayce, this is what the story of Noah and the flood was echoing in the Bible. Then the source said this is when large swaths of pre-Diluvian culture went out and settled places like Egypt, the Yucatan, and Peru, becoming high priests and spiritual guides of the developing cultures they found there. It would not be until Hugh Lynn and Edgar Evans grew up would anyone ever attempt to prove or disprove any of this stuff. Edgar Evans' book on the subject is cogent and very well written. I do recommend it. It opens like a whole rabbit episode. Hey kids, have you ever read Plato's Timaeus? Apparently, Edgar and Hugh Lynn were not entirely unsuccessful in their search for physical evidence, but it was all generally dismissed as pseudo-archaeology. Because, you know, aliens. The way Atlantean cosmology linked up with Christian mythos is fairly straightforward as well, and reflects both traditional and Gnostic philosophy. In the same way that Amelius, or Adam Kadmon, incarnated as Adam, so too was he manifest as the Messiah Jesus Christ. Likewise, Jesus is the example we are to follow as we seek our return to the Maker by realizing the light of Christ, or the Adam Kadmon within. This is well represented in John 14, verse 5 through 7.
Bible time.
Bible time.
Thomas saith unto him, Lord, we know not whither thou goest, and how can we know the way? Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. If ye had known me, ye should have known my Father also. And from henceforth ye know him, and have seen him.
Similar sentiment is found in the Gospels of Thomas, discovered in 1945 after Cayce's death in the Nag Hammadi Library.
Jesus said, "If your leaders say to you, 'Look, the Father's kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the Father's kingdom is within you, and it is outside you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourself, then you live in poverty, and you are the poverty."
Naturally, some of this proved difficult for Edgar's Christian upbringing to square itself with, as it was with a number of his followers. But the source warned that this was in fact the correct interpretation and replied on the issue.
Much might be given respecting that ye, call the Bible, this is passed through many hands, many that would turn that which was written into the meanings that would suit their own purposes, as ye yourselves often do.
Nonetheless, the source warned that Christ would return both in the human heart but also physically in a body. When asked what his role was in all this, Edgar was told that he was
one who is to be a forerunner of the Christ consciousness, that force or power on the earth that has been spoken of through the ages.
And this is where Christ consciousness became such a buzzword in the New Age community, as it is to this very day.
Oh man, it makes so much sense.
I found this interesting because it's here we can see the New Age movement really is more like a homegrown apple pie Christianity from America, but injected with long-held ideas and Gnosticism and occult tradition of like thousands of years.
Yeah, like when I first heard about Christ consciousness in the New Age, it really sounded to me like a state of being that you would achieve if you were to become, say, a Buddha or a yogi, like somebody who practices, ego death over and over again until you are one with the cosmos. But that vision of a monk just meditating by himself under a tree, he's not participating in the material world, whereas you have Jesus Christ going to prostitutes and lepers and sick people and heathens and giving them food and drink and praying for them. Like there's this whole, community where you're supposed to give back to other people or help them with charity that is imbibed in this Christ consciousness, I think. So it is about being a Buddha of your own sort, but you have to give back to people around you. So it becomes like more of a helping the other crabs out of the bucket situation instead of ignoring them or pushing them back down.
Like, spoiler alert, that's essentially what the source wanted people to think. That was the message it wanted people to adopt. Is that you're all part of one big human community. You're all brothers in God. You should come together.
Yeah, and I truly believe that's probably what Jesus and Buddha and all of these masters have been trying to teach people, but they instead end up being worshipped, and like people bring money to them to perform miracles and worship them and stuff. It's just, that's not what the purpose of this is. It's for them to be a teacher as an example so that we all can access that. Like we can all be ascended masters.
The interesting thing is that the spiritual upgrades for the New Age, if you could call them that, were seemingly intended to accompany technological ones as well. This is evidenced by the number of souls Edgar believed he had encountered with past lives in Atlantis. Folks who could revolutionize the world today, making them apt recipients of universal wisdom. All told, a whopping total of 650 people had been identified as having former incarnations in Atlantis. Most prominently, one of these folks was Marion L. Stansel, an engine mechanic who had heard about the Cayces during one of their talks in Birmingham in 1928 to gather support for the Association of National Investigators. Stansel came into the Cayce fold through a series of psychic events which began while he was stationed in France during World War I. He had been a victim of a mustard gas attack. In the hospital, he had contracted the flu, suffered heart failure, and then died. Before he knew it, Stansel was hovering above his body, and suddenly he was aware of his family back in Alabama praying for his recovery. Next thing he knew, a psychopomp, something he called a spirit guide, guided him to the land of the recently dead, where he asked to meet Jesus. When Jesus showed up, he pleaded with him to return back to Earth. Jesus told him that not only could he go back, he was being permitted the formula for a mechanical device that would save the planet from ecological collapse in the next millennium. To the astonishment of the doctors attending, Stansel suddenly sat up after 20 minutes of not breathing. He had just been declared dead. Just as miraculous, all signs of flu or mustard gas poisoning had totally vanished.
Whoa, because he should have been brain dead. Like he would have been a vegetable.
Yeah.
For not breathing that long. This is a great example of a near-death experience.
Yes.
You go and come back.
We found they are remarkably common. In trance, Edgar accurately revealed that Stenzel had significant psychic ability as well, and was being given through his dreams the plan to a perpetual motion motor, which had been designed in the astral realm by DeWitt Clinton, a spirit who in life had been a governor of New York and helped engineer the Erie Canal, according to the source.
The motor will develop power on its own action. The idea and plans, as have been worked out, are the better application of the created or universal energy.
The catch was that in order to bring forth said invention, it would require the company of other souls who also had incarnated in Atlantis, who, fortunately, were to be found in Cayce's wealthy New York benefactors Edwin and Morton Blumenthal, who subsequently put up the cash to begin developing prototypes. When the Blumenthals asked during trance how much they stood to profit from helping develop such a device, they were told, a cool $10 million in the honor of revolutionizing society, a prize too good to pass up chasing. Besides, they were building an expensive hospital for Edgar, who was about as good at spending other people's money as he was diagnosing their ailments. As Edgar walked along the windswept beach, he imagined the hospital rising like a lighthouse on the highest sand dune between Cape Henry and the city limits, which, dipping into their personal funds, is exactly where the Blumenthals purchased 5 acres worth of adjoining parcels of land to begin its construction. Built as a massive antebellum-style plantation house, the main building would have 4 levels. The basement had therapy rooms, an x-ray, and a fluoroscope machine. The stairs to the entrance was on the 2nd floor, where the lobby was found and adjoining rooms for a library, doctor's offices, lecture hall, and treatment rooms. The 3rd and 4th floors would be rooms for patients and private rooms for visitors. They eventually stuck Leslie on the 4th floor, for instance. If that were not lavish enough, the source had recommended that balanced life be composed of both work and play. Otherwise, Jack could become a dull boy. So, a tennis court, croquet, a shuffleboard park, club room for cards, and bathhouses on the beach were installed to keep it well-rounded. It was, after all, as Edgar reminded everyone, intended to be a place for patients to seek mental and spiritual help as well. You know, not just body stuff. Ultimately, a meditation garden was decided over a chapel because it seemed less culty. Edgar Cayce was worried future generations might just go off script and begin worshiping him or one of the entities that they channeled, besides Christ. Christ was still number one. Altogether, this was pretty risky, merely because they had to bill customers as members of their paranormal investigative group, Annie, to avoid being charged with either fortune-telling or practicing medicine without a license. Treatments and readings were legally seen as partly experimental and partly ecclesiastical in nature. For example, it was just prior to construction that the Archangel Michael kicked down the door astrally speaking and proclaimed through Edgar in an unusually loud voice,
"I am Mikael, Lord of the Way," Cayce proclaimed in an unusually loud voice. "Bend thy head, O ye children of men, give heed unto the way as is set before you in that sermon on the mount. For even as the voice of the one who stood beside the sea and called all men unto the way, that those that would hearken might know there was again a staff in David, for in Zion thy names were written, and in service will come truth."
So it was kind of ecclesiastical in nature. They had the Archangel Michael telling them they had to do it. So when construction began in the summer of 1928, everybody was impressed with how much skill Edgar had wielding a hammer and saw, nearly forgetting he was a Kentucky farmer boy who considered himself adept at building a barn and relished the opportunity to work next to his sons. The good times were not to last, however, as Morton sent a telegram from New York to halt construction immediately. Mr. Blumenthal received a bill from the contractor, and it was nearly double what had been quoted. It didn't take long to discover who the culprit was. The contractor told Morton that considerable modifications to the plan had been made. Baths and bathrooms were added throughout the building. This put Morton out $15,000 of his own money, and he was detectably angry with Edgar over it. Until that point, Edgar thought he had been given the charge to make sure the hospital was built correctly, and subsequently relinquished any imagined control back to Morton, who oversaw the process from back in New York. This seems to have been the beginning of a huge turning point for the relationship, one that the readings had warned might happen if Morton became too greedy or self-obsessed. Edgar was sick about it, and once he even snapped at Gladys, who felt compelled to remind Edgar not to fall behind on his dream readings for Morton. He threatened to fire her right then and there, announcing with full white boy anger that he was in charge, not the Blumenthals. The truth was that the excessive cost and rising pressure to recoup them had transformed the ANI from a spiritual family with Edgar as the father to a corporate entity needing to make money headed by Morton Blumenthal Blumenthal as the boss. Edgar was quickly becoming the golden goose of the story, and he was expected to produce. It was eventually decided that overnight stays would cost $100 for a night in a single room, $65 for a double room facing the ocean, and $45 to stay in the communal ward. Treatments would be charged at a rate of $2 per session. Until the hospital turned a profit, the Blumenthals, Dave Kahn, and 2 other partners were expected to pay the difference. Even still, Morton's spirit had not been entirely hardened by money, and during the dedication ceremonies, formally gave ownership of the hospital over to the A&I. Later writing on the matter,
Here was a center for the distribution of God's blessing to the suffering. Here, perhaps, the life of 2 worlds, the earthly plane and that of the spirit, might meet in common endeavor and make more understandable the great truths of the universe.
or he could just be a nerd about it and say, abrahadabra. It means the same thing. When the doors to the hospital finally opened in mid-February 1929, patients began coming from near and far, admitting and treating upwards of 40 people in the next 10 months, using any number of methodologies or devices recommended by Cayce during trance. The Cayce Hospital would treat a number of ailments, from bad digestion to syphilis to asthma, bronchitis, and gallbladder problems, some staying hours, others staying months. Nearly everyone, though, was said to have been cured and were released, singing praises for the world to hear.
What a time to be alive.
It's like in episode 1. It's working! So of course, it's one thing to be wowed by the healing abilities of these treatments. It's another thing to explore why they may work. Sometimes advice was basic, like avoiding wet feet or exposure to the elements. On the other end of the spectrum, however, advice could be downright esoteric, including ailments caused by karmic backlash.
Thus, you can suffer a bad cold from getting mad or from cursing out someone.
Oftentimes, treatments would follow along with standard medical practice of the day, usually with just a slight modification for the particular patient. And oftentimes, it required, well, a bit more work on the physician's behalf. Sometimes, the source was ahead of its time. Apparently, people thought bananas were poisonous to infants in the 1920s, but they're actually pretty useful for treating children with celiac. Other explanations were never popularly adopted. Psoriasis was explained by the source as the thinning of the intestinal walls, which resulted in the body attempting to throw off toxins elsewhere, namely the skin. Migraines were sometimes caused by a congested colon, and morning sickness by a lack of proper nutrients needed to build the baby's body. Another thing seemed evident by listening to Cayce's readings is the prolific focus on the spinal cord, and especially how injuries to it can cause symptoms that doctors would plainly never expect had anything to do with the spine, like asthma, stuttering, and even violent behavior. In this regard, osteopathic adjustment was paramount.
Chiropractic.
Right, if Edgar's even slightly correct about any of this, it seems like a huge disservice to everyone to just broadly consider chiropractic a pseudoscience. Like, what if it's really, really helpful, and now we just label it as pseudoscience and take pills that only work some of the time and then make us even sicker some of the time?
Not to mention even massage. And it's funny because if you look at most insurance providers will allow you to, they'll pay for a physical therapist, but they won't pay for chiropractic or massage.
Silly.
You know, just to throw my hat into the discussion a second, I think there is an objective best way that our posture, you know, because of the way our bones and everything interlocks with itself, I think there objectively is a proper way of sitting and having full capability with, you know, your bodily functions.
Yeah.
And I think that does directly affect your health, whether you believe it or not. It sounds kind of woo-woo and wacky, but like, I know that if I sit wrong for long enough, I feel like crap. And sometimes I will just get like a stuffy nose because I laid wrong or something.
Or even as simple as like if you're trying to water your garden with a hose, if it's all wadded up and the water's not going to come out right, you're not going to get the pressure that you need. So it makes sense to straighten out the hose so that the energy of the water can flow straight through it. If your body is in tune and corrected and has good posture, your health is likely to be better as well.
It was claimed that 4 basic processes were responsible for the health of the body at a cellular level, which were assimilation, elimination, circulation, and relaxation. Assimilation, for instance, would include mealtime, where the source admonished patients to not eat when they were upset, angry, or distressed, which would cause food to be improperly processed and become toxic for the body. So don't eat when you're mad.
What about when you're hangry?
That's probably fine. Certain combinations of food were also to be avoided, as different digestive requirements for certain food groups could clash. As you might expect, refined foods, sugars, red meat, and fried food were generally considered harmful.
What we think and what we eat combined together, Cayce said, make what we are, physically and mentally.
You are what you eat.
Yep.
And think, also.
This reminds me a lot of a kind of Taoist diet where where it specified that if you mix certain foods together, it actually hinders digestion and it has negative effects on your body. And it's not surprisingly, Western diets are the opposite of what is described as being healthy, like mixing in starches or grains with high amounts of dairies and meats. Like you think of the hamburger, it's like the processing time, the actual digestion time for each of those is different, and they all need different enzymes to be digested. So it actually slows it down, and it slows down your whole bodily system.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Even in some cultures today, like if you go to a legit Indian restaurant, they won't have ice water because it's thought to basically hinder your digestion to drink cold drinks, and you're supposed to eat it separately. And then same thing with the different spices and the sides and the chutneys and stuff that you're supposed to eat are all based on what is easily digestible together and works in synergy together rather than hinder your digestion.
It's interesting too, because a lot of the stuff that he was saying about the spine and spinal adjustments is totally in line also with some Eastern ideologies regarding like the chakras and yoga. And even in ancient Egypt, the Jed pillar with the backbone of Osiris and the raising of the Jed pillar.
The cause of many people's early demise, the source claimed, was deficiencies in regard to elimination specifically, which could be helped by simply drinking a glass of warm lemon water in the morning and breathing deeply. You know, hippie stuff. If lemon water sounded too dainty, there was also enemas and colonics.
It's funny because now we've circled back around to an understanding that lemon water is actually good because the citric acid turns to alkaline in your stomach, and so it actually helps with your pH balance, which helps your body function better and regulate itself better when you have the right pH levels. So it's kind of funny, all this stuff that he's talking about is finally being embraced as factual.
The whole thing about pH levels was a big thing for Edgar Cayce during trance as well, and that was way ahead of its time, I guess.
Yeah, because they're just figuring out now too that like cancer, for example, thrives in an acidic environment. So you're supposed to eat a lot of alkaline foods, like, you know, dark greens, alkaline water, like clean water that's not acidic. But what it does is there's free radicals in your body, and if you have something alkaline, it neutralizes them. But if you have acidic stuff, it increases the amount of free radicals in your body that causes cancer. So, wow.
Circulation was described as important to keeping the body vital. Both red and white blood, the latter referring to the lymphatic system, were mentioned. It's a little alchemical sounding. And then to keep circulation strong, exercise was recommended, along with massage, which at the time was believed to have absolutely no medical value whatsoever.
I like that he calls an enema an internal bath.
Have an internal tornado for you now. Lastly, relaxation was important too, as
the activity of the mental or soul force of the body may control entirely the whole physical body through the action of the balance in the sympathetic nervous system. For the sympathetic nerve system is to the soul and spirit forces as the cerebrospinal is to the physical forces of an entity.
So your nervous system is connected to your soul body. Good to know. Habits, Cayce pointed out, were the link between our minds and our bodies. And I know I've heard Abraham Hicks, I think, and even Daryl Anka say that a belief is just a thought that you're in the habit of thinking a lot. So this is kind of in that vein of things.
Oh, a thought habit.
Yeah, a belief is a thought habit. Emotions were also quite important, as they were said to move electrical energies throughout the nervous system, which affected our entire organism at a cellular level. Cayce in trance went as far to say,
while it is true that medicines, compounds, mechanical appliances, radiation all have their place and are of the creative forces, yet the ability of arousing hope, of creating confidence, of bringing the awareness of faith into the consciousness of an individual is very necessary. Only when any portion of the anatomical structure of a human being is put in accord with the divine influences may real healing come.
And that
worry and fear are the greatest foes to a normal, healthy physical body. Frickin' men.
It reminds me of the saying that it matters what you think about what you think.
That's a good one.
And like fear is not only the mind killer, but the body killer too. I've made a purposeful decision in my life to stop spinning myself up and getting worried about stuff that doesn't matter. And you focus in the now moment and everything's fine. But like part of the worry and the hyperfixation on certain negative things can actually make you sick.
According to Cayce in trance, focusing on a particular illness too much would actually cause that illness to happen. So if you just think about cancer all the time. You're gonna get cancer.
Budget the time so that there may be a regular period for sustaining the physical being and also for sustaining the mental and spiritual being. As it is necessary for recreation and rest for the physical, so it is necessary that there be recreation and rest for the mental.
So it's okay to play video games and watch movies sometimes.
Sometimes.
All the time. In its default state, if it's well taken care of, the body was considered a miraculous vessel in and of itself, primarily in its ability to heal, which was ultimately, as the source said, generated from within. In one reading done for Tommy House, the human body was described none too dissimilar from an alchemical vessel.
There is no greater factory in the universe than that of a human body in its natural, normal reacting state. For there are those machines or glands within the body capable of producing, from the very air or water and the food values taken into the body, any element at all that is known to the material world.
Moreover,
Every cell of the body is a universe in itself.
Sadhguru told me that I was the master magician because I can turn a banana into me just by eating it. I really wish I could say it in an inappropriate Indian accent, but I will refrain. Now, in terms of turning oneself into alchemical gold, in a biological sense, there were hints of that as well.
For, as may be told by any pathologist, there is no known reason why any individual entity should not live as long as it desires, and there is no death, save in thy consciousness, because all others have died, ye expect to, and you do.
It's kind of a big claim, right?
Right, and you notice that a lot of people that live a long time continue to act as if they were 30 or 40 or 50. They get up and they do their stuff, and they don't complain, they don't sit and worry, they don't take extra rests because they think that they can't handle the burden of living.
They probably meditate a lot, scale the wizard tower, and get their butt cleaned by a wizard in a pool with a hippo.
Or have large families or a bunch of friends that, give them meaning to life and make them want to stick around.
The life-prolonging ability, the source claimed, was housed in the endocrine system, to which its glands were described as that which enables the body, physically throughout, to reproduce itself. The glandular system, according to Cayce, was the meeting point between the physical body and the spiritual body, and related them to the 7 chakras, which were conceptualized as growth centers for both the physical and spiritual bodies. These 7 glands included the gonad, the leiden, the adrenals, the thymus, the thyroid, and the pineal and pituitary glands. Just like in any New Age occult book nowadays, it's all there for you. Anger, Cayce said, caused the glands to secrete poison, while joy had the quote opposite effect. Likewise, no one can hate his neighbor and not have stomach or liver trouble. No one can be jealous and allow the anger of same and not have upset digestion or a heart disorder. In June of 1928, one reading said, fear is the root of most of the ills of mankind. While on the other hand, a good laugh and arousing even to hilariousness is good for the body, physically, mentally, and gives the opportunity for greater mental and spiritual awakening. I'm not afraid anymore.
Oh yeah, and then there's also laughing therapy.
It's a type of yoga, in fact. Now, you've seen Donnie Darko. You got the self-help guy who comes up. He's like, all human emotions, they ultimately come down to love and fear.
He was a pedophile, so let's not talk about him.
Well, this is also similar to some of the lines that we see in Twin Peaks, Fear and Love. It's the coffee and the cherry pie.
I hear David Lynch is a bit of a meditator himself. Excuse me, my good sir, have you heard about the jelly donut? Following this idea a little bit more, Cayce's source claimed that mildness was the key to youthfulness.
One is ever just as young as the heart and the purpose. Keep sweet, keep friendly, keep loving, if ye would keep young.
All healing, Cayce said, could be broken down to a fundamental level.
All strength, all healing of every nature is the changing of the vibrations from within, the attuning of the divine within the living tissue of a body to creative energies. This alone is healing. Whether it is accomplished by the use of drugs, the knife, or anything else, it is the attuning of the atomic structure of the living force to its spiritual heritage.
If we got into the etymology of healing, that's also what it means. It's like bringing it back into wholeness.
Like alignment and balance, yeah.
And my favorite part, Justice Crowley urged his followers, first and foremost, before anything else, one should always inflame thyself in prayer. Cayce in Trance would say something similar.
Never worry as long as you can pray. When you can't pray, you'd better begin to worry, for then you really have something to worry about.
But if you'd like to know what it is we're supposed to be worried about, because of Edgar Cayce's predictions, many of which came true and some still haven't, along with, how he died and the one time he got arrested,
Oh yeah.
then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you this extended episode, you'll get all our extended episodes from our library. Once you log in on Patreon, you can browse all the extended episodes from right within Spotify. It's very convenient. I'll send you a 5x5 high-quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art at no additional cost to you, and you'll get the secret keys to our Discord
Discord server where you can tell us about all the secret government stuff that you've remote viewed from your crystal ball in your secret bunker where you're listening to this show. Oh, also, we're going to talk about how Edgar Cayce was a spy again, because he was way before the Hal Puthoff days. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew, pew, pew.